Oi, you there. Are you struggling to figure out why your Minecraft build isn't working? Do you wish recreating full games in Minecraft was much more simple to do? Have you ever wanted to throw your entire computer setup out of the window? Well, now you can have your very own CuppaTeaExe plushie to help solve all of your problems for you. Problem solving not guaranteed. And of course, I had to bring a tea with me. So next time you have a question on how to get something to work, simply ask your CuppaTeaExe plush. Or maybe shout at it. It wouldn't be very nice, but it works sometimes. Just don't forget to bring it tea every so often, and everything will be just fine. Not guaranteed. So what are you waiting for? Grab your very own CuppaTeaExe plushie today. Use the top link in the video description to head on over to MAKESHIP.com, where you can join the petition to help bring this plushie to life. We only have 10 days to get over 200 or more people to join it, and once it's over, it's gone forever. Massive shout out to the team over at MAKESHIP for this opportunity, and a massive thank you to all of you watching for helping to make this possible in the first place. So if you want a little CuppaTeaExe plushie that you can ask for command block advice, or to shout at when things go wrong, make sure you use the link in the video description to get your very own today. But with that being said, please enjoy the video. Everything you just saw is the intro to my Security Breach Ruin map fully recreated in Minecraft. There were no mods, no texture packs, and no additional editing, and all of it was done by only using command blocks. This is just one section out of many more to come, but this should give you an idea of what the finished map is going to look like. So without further ado, let's go ahead and take a look at how I got this all to work. Starting of course with the intro cutscene, as I was able to not only recreate the camera movements, but also add a Cassie model with full animations. Now the cutscene itself doesn't instantly play the moment I open up the world, but is instead triggered when I step over a certain block on the scaffolding that leads up to the entrance. This does mean that I also added a full exterior to the PizzaPlex, but that's a topic we'll take a look at a later video. And before you ask, no, this isn't just a ruined version of the exterior from my original PizzaPlex map, it's a completely different and fully customized version of what I think the exterior of the PizzaPlex could look like. Going back to the original topic though, the Cassie model is actually 3 different armor stands that are animated in ways that recreate the cutscene. There's a main armor stand for the head, body and legs, and 2 separate ones for the left and right arm. Both of which are force teleported to a set position around the center one, that way Cassie's arms don't detach when she's moving around. That would be very weird and also very bad. The animation itself works with 2 different scoreboard timers, with one being for moving the main body and the others for moving the arms and the head. As the scoreboard counts up and hits a certain number, an execute command powers a merge command that changes the rotation values of each of the armor stand's limbs. Now at the same time, another command block is rotating the entire model at once to look left and right, that way Cassie's model looks in different directions as she's calling out for Gregory. Now staying with armor stands for a little longer, this is also how I was able to lock my view into the cinematic and follow a set path throughout the cutscene. What's happening is that I'm constantly being teleported to an armor stand so that way I'm not able to move around, which also locks my view to what's in front of me. This was actually a lot easier to set up than the Cassie animation, as it's just a single command block that teleports the armor stand to the left and slightly up and forward towards the entrance. Finally, after adding some Minecraft music and the voice lines, the full intro cutscene is now completed. Once the cinematic ends, I'm now able to freely roam around the lobby to the ruined PizzaPlex. And since this is more of an adventure map to explore instead of a story-driven map, there are no barriers stopping me from going off to blocked off places that aren't accessible in Security Breach. This includes the entire left wing of the entrance, the parking garage under the opposite end of the room, and of course the main hall where the Glamrock Freddy statue used to be. With that being said, since we're not supposed to be in these areas in the game, there isn't any functionality to them, but they're still cool places to walk around and explore. Now throughout this entire time, you'll have noticed that the area surrounding me has been lit up as I've been walking around the place, which brings me up to the next mechanic of this map, with that being the flashlight. Normally this map is going to be extremely dark, which is obvious as it's based on a game called Ruin. And while there are still hints of light blocks around the build, most of it is still going to be pitch black. So to let me see around the place, I've added a flashlight that I get to keep on me at all times, and I can use whenever I want to. To find it, all I have to do is walk up to where the entry ticket counter would be, and the broken staffbot arm automatically puts one in my inventory when I get close enough. To use it, I simply just need to hold the named netherite ingot in my hand, and then unequip it to turn it off again. Now this isn't actually shining a beam of light wherever I'm looking, but is instead a constant light source that surrounds the player. When a command block detects that I'm holding the named item, a 3x3 cube of level 11 light blocks is filled around my current position to light up a small area surrounding me. And as I keep moving around, the command block keeps powering and creates a new cube every time. To then remove the light source once I move away from where I started, 4 more command blocks form a 5x5 square perimeter of air around me, which is only set to replace level 11 light blocks. When the air meets the light blocks that I've placed around myself, it instantly removes them, which then makes sure that the flashlight doesn't leave a trail of lights behind me. As for turning the flashlight off, a larger 10x10 cube removes all the level 11 light blocks around me just to make sure that there are none left around the build. And throughout this entire PizzaPlex, I haven't used any other level 11 light blocks to light up the build with, so normal lighting isn't going to change no matter what. The next feature is over in Glamrock Gifts, not long after getting the flashlight. Here's where the broken staff bot is going to jump scare me once I get within a certain range away from it. Now the model itself is a little more complicated than Cassie's, as it has 4 extra armor stands for the wheels at its feet and the lower body, which all have blocks of coal on their heads. The base armor stand is also slightly taller than the player, which I've done by using the attribute scale command to resize the different parts of the staff bot. As for the animation, all of it is done inside of this mess of blocks just outside the build, where it's probably impossible for anyone to tell what's even going on here. But each one is doing its own separate thing, with that either being rotating one of the armor stand limbs with a scoreboard timer, or having a play sound command play to recreate the sound effects. This is easily the most important part out of any Minecraft map, as without any sound effects, exploring the map would be so much more boring and it would make everything feel soulless. This is also how I'm able to catch the players off guard with loud impact sounds like the staff bot alarm, which is simply a high-pitched trident sound playing at the position of the staff bot. Everything so far has some sort of play sound command connected to it, and even where there's not a lot of sounds going on, the constant ambience from the world biome is always going to give off some sort of noise. Now I would skip over the doorways, as I have nearly 20 hours worth of live streams where I do nothing but add hundreds of these to this map. I've started live streaming a whole lot more often, so if you do want to check out more behind the scenes of my maps, or even just learn about command blocks more in general, make sure you're subscribed with notifications on, so that way you know the next time that I'm live. But for those of you that don't have that many hours to spend, every door in this map works in the exact same way, which starts by powering a command block once I get within 3.5 blocks away from the center of the door frame. From there, a series of clone commands will copy a single frame of a separate door build to then make it seem like the door is opening when one command block plays after the other. Then once I walk away from the door, the animation is going to play in the opposite order to close the door on its own, and the build then goes back to normal. Even though this is just a simple system that's only made up of 8 command blocks, this works a lot better than in my original PizzaPlex map, which would close the doors automatically after a while even if I was still standing next to the door. This system no longer has that issue, as the door will stay open for as long as I'm within 3.5 blocks away from the center of it. This now leads us to the second floor balcony, where the last 2 features for this room are more sound effects for both the daycare door closing and the Mini Music Man music box. Try saying that 5 times fast. The daycare entrance simply uses 2 play sound commands of wooden doors and trapdoors closing once I get close to it, but the music box obviously has a lot more going on. Instead of using note blocks though, I've set up a system of play sound commands to play the right note block sound with the right pitch for the song. Now this can be pretty confusing to find which pitch values match the normal pitch of note blocks, so I'll leave a helpful guide that I've used in the description in case you want to try this out for yourself. Each command is then executing the play sound at a coordinate just underneath the walkway, so that way it isn't going to be heard from all over the lobby, but is still clear when close by to it. That now wraps up everything for the lobby section of the prologue, as now I need to head over to the kitchen to find the next working features. However, as I'm making my way there, the entire elevator is going to fall down as I'm halfway up the ladder. This is one of the many scripted events that change the build itself, as I'm obviously no longer able to go back to the lobby now that there's something blocking the way. Now usually big animations like this are hard to pull off, as builds need to be cloned to set coordinates in a set order to make it seem like the object is moving. So with the elevator, this separate build is being copied into the elevator shaft and is being pasted 1 block lower throughout the sequence. To then make it look like it's falling down faster, I've skipped over every other block to double the speed that the animation is going to play at, so that way there's only 14 command blocks instead of the 28 that would cover up every block in the elevator shaft. And with some added sound effects to finish the build up, the final result works really well in a Minecraft form. On top of that though, I've also decided to add a chance for Cassie to say her Cassie sandwich line right after the sequence plays, which uses the random command. These are extremely easy to set up, as all the command is doing is storing the result of the randomizer to a set scoreboard, with the randomizer itself only being this small part right here. There's a 1 in 100 chance for the voice line to play out, but if the score rolls on 100, a command block is then going to power the voice line and put it in the chat. Now as I mentioned, since all of this changes the build so much, I've had to add a reset system to put everything back to normal. This goes for the ATM at the staircase all the way to the end of the chapter for any and all events that change up the build. Now to do this, I've set up some extra commands to play at further points in the map that copy the original versions of an area and put them back in the normal version of the build. Taking a look at more of those events, eventually the vent floor is going to be removed once I reach a certain point, which then leads me to the kitchen sequence where a few more things are going to happen afterward. The first of them is the Glamrock Chica water figure that swings back and forth, which is simply just an armor stand that's having its head look up and down every so often. Now once I get closer to it, another play sound command recreates the sound of pots and pans being knocked over, before Chica herself jump scares me from behind one of the shelves. The Chica model easily uses the most amount of armor stands by far, as not only does it have the normal body and arms, but there are multiple other armor stands for the different cracks and garbage that Chica has all around her. And even though you might have expected the jump scare to happen, it's still just as impactful and intimidating as in game, as the model is taller than the player while also playing that high-pitched screeching sound. As for the commands, the animation doesn't use as many as the staff bots since there's no point in animating something that you're not able to see. In Glamrock Gifts, the whole staff bot moves around since I can see the entire thing from any angle, but here a command grabs the player's view to look at Chica's face, meaning we can't see her arms or legs move below it. The whole sequence only lasts for a few seconds, but it's still one of my favorite features so far just because of how seamless it shows up. Let's finally go ahead and take a look at the thing that most of you have been wondering about this whole time, which is the Faz wrench and the door lock conduits. Now getting the Faz wrench works in the exact same way as the flashlight, as it will instantly be put in my inventory once I walk up to the area where I pick it up at. The conduits themselves are marked with these decorated acacia signs, as well as a title command to tell me the prompt to use it. Throwing the Faz wrench while the prompt is active then teleports me to a separate build where I can actually play the minigame itself. Now I have actually gone over all of this before in a live stream I did a while ago, however I've completely changed the design of it as the previous one was way too overcomplicated for what I wanted to do. Now each of these platforms is for a different conduit around the Pizzaplex, however I'm just going to go ahead and remove all of them but one for the time being, so that way we can just focus on this first one. The whole thing starts with this small setup right here, where once I pick up the Faz wrench for a first time, this redstone block is going to power a tell raw command for the voice lines, as well as these two command blocks right here to replace the item if I throw it out of my inventory. So if I were to accidentally throw it away while not standing next to a conduit, I'm going to instantly get it back and don't have to worry about losing it. If I am standing next to a conduit though, this command block here is going to power instead, which is then going to set a redstone block down to power the system that's going to keep me locked inside the minigame play area. Now if you're as big of a security breach nerd as I am, you'll know that there are 19 total conduits around the map. However, instead of making 19 separate minigames, the same frame is going to be used every single time, and only the lines and orders are going to change inside the build. As of right now, I've finished the first 7 of them, so you can see how the conduit changes for each one every time. So to let the system know that I'm actually using the conduit, this scoreboard is then going to be set to 1 to let the future command blocks know that I'm using the first conduit. At the same time, this second scoreboard is also set to 1, which just makes sure that every other command block knows that I'm using a conduit in the first place. This is where I'm going to be given 5 different items, with one of them to exit the minigame and the other 4 to power the different lines with. Now each of these command blocks are detecting for when I'm holding a certain item with a certain name, and is then going to power a chain of command blocks to put blue concrete on either side of the line that I have selected. However, the exit item works a little differently, as its command block is only going to power when I throw the item, which is then going to cause a second command block to power and teleports me back inside the build standing in front of the conduit that I was using. Now at the same time that I hold one of the numbered items, a scoreboard for its corresponding line is going to keep on increasing until it reaches a max of 115. Then if I let go of the item or hold a different one, it's then going to start decreasing until it goes back to 0. This is exactly how these two systems here detect how far the power has gone through the line, which is when these blocks are going to start filling up the build itself. So if I'm using the first conduit and the score for line 2 is set to 0 or less, it's then going to power this clone command right here, which is then going to copy this top line of blocks into the minigame area itself. So since this is just a blank line, this is the one that's going to be shown when the scoreboard is set to 0 or the item is not being held at all. However, the moment I hold the item and the scoreboard starts to increase, a new clone command is going to power, which is then going to copy over the row beneath it, which is when the line is going to start filling up by adding a new row of blocks to the line every time. So imagine that each one of these rows is going to get cloned over to the conduit as the score goes up, which is how I got it to look like it's filling up one block at a time. Then when the scoreboard starts to go down, the previous clone command powers and reverses the order that the rows got copied in, meaning the row is going to start decreasing again. Finally, to beat the game and power the conduit, this command block here is checking to see if the scores for each line are within the range of the blue glass. So for this case, for conduit 1, it's checking to see if line 2 is within 21 to 60, and if line 3 is within 71 to 110. Now when that happens, it's then going to send an output to teleport me back to the build with any of the items I had in my inventory beforehand, and then places a comparator down at the door system, so that way I'm finally able to open the door and continue on through the build. And if you're curious as to how I managed to overly complicate my first design, I've gone over to my test world to show off the build I made a while ago now for this. The core mechanic works in the exact same way with named items and scoreboards, but instead of cloning over a frame of the line, I made it so that each block is placed individually with its own set block command. So not only did I have to change a block when the scoreboard goes up and down, but also when the line is within the blue glass to show off that it's currently being powered. This was way too much work for what little really needed to be done, so I'm glad that I managed to simplify the system. Hopefully I was able to explain that well, as the amount of commands might have looked scary in comparison to what's actually being done. Luckily, the next sequence is a lot more simple, as the blob's appearance doesn't use any complicated command blocks. This is the only animatronic in the entire build to be made out of blocks, as not only does it look better for bigger creatures, but armor stands also cause more lag since they're still considered to be entities. Personally, I don't think it's worth the trade-off, especially as we're only going to be seeing this for a fraction of a second. To get it to move, there are 7 build frames that are lined up in a sequence to move the blob from a resting position to crawling up into the ceiling once I get to the bottom of the staircase. The rest of the commands are either for sound effects, but there's also a set block that removes the comparator to stop the animation from playing again. The next 2 events use a mix of mechanics that we've seen many times by now, like the Falling Light, which runs on clone commands, and the Dread unit lines, which use tell raw text commands. So this brings us to the final sequence of the prologue, which is the Monty encounter and the title screen. This is very similar to the Chica jump scare, but slightly more advanced, as the player also needs to move on their own to fall into the water tunnel. Monty always starts out at the bottom of the pipe and has his own set of animations that cycle over and over. And even though he has no legs, there's not much difference from any other character animation, as his arms, his head, and his hair all move around the same way. The only change is his main body position is rotated 80 degrees backward to have him face chest down, while also having a secondary body armor stand for the wires that used to connect to his legs. And to make Monty actually crawl along the floor, the model needs to be teleported down into the block it's standing on top of, so that way the armor stand is touching the floor and stops Monty from looking like he's crawling in midair. It looks very funny while it's happening, but it's definitely not supposed to happen in-game. The rest of the sequence all runs on the exact same scoreboard timer, where the actual movement of the model, the player, and the title screen are all connected together. For Monty to move, a series of command blocks teleports Monty's entire model up and forward to leap towards me, meanwhile the player is teleported backward away from him to fall into the water. The execute command is extremely useful for this, as it allows the entire thing to move all at once, while also teleporting relative to its current position instead of teleporting to a certain set of coordinates. This is the same way how I'm able to get the water current to drag the player down the tunnel before teleporting to the title screen. In a previous video, I mentioned that I plan on going over text display entities as they are very cool in the way that they work, and now is the time that I'm going to do just that. So as the Monty scoreboard keeps increasing, another layer of black concrete is going to be removed to reveal the title of the game, which is built by using a mix of blocks and text displays. To summon the text, this command here sets the tag of the entity, the text itself, and if I want there to be a background or not. Now since I'm doing this all within a black box, this part didn't really matter to me, so what I could do instead is change the color of the text so that way I can make it look a bit different. Now instead of actually typing out the color itself, I prefer using a hex code as it lets me be a lot more flexible with the color that I want to use. Minecraft only has a few different presets to choose from, so I recommend that you do the same as well. So once you've decided what you want to write down, you're then able to hit enter and then summon in your text display. Now from there you're then able to teleport it wherever you want and make it face in any direction, as it's going to work just like any other normal entity. Now that's just the basics of how text displays work, as if you want to get more advanced with it, I would recommend using another method and use something like MC Stacker, where you can customize the entity on a website which will then generate a command for you to summon in game. For a while, I was using something similar to generate armor stands for me, but once I get used to this, I'm sure that I won't need to use it anymore. A good example is the scale option right here, which is how I was able to make the text so big for the title instead of just being the default size like we saw earlier on. But once you're done with it, the command then gets generated inside this text box right here, and then you can then copy it and paste it in game. But heading back over to Minecraft, once the text is done flickering, a final command block then moves me towards the U just like in Ruin, before I'm then teleported to Monty Golf at the start of Chapter 1. Altogether, this is the first time that I've ever made an intro sequence like this, but I really like how it turned out. Overall, getting back into working on the ruined Pizzaplex has been a lot of fun so far, and I'm curious to see what you think about it and if you're interested in seeing more builds like this in the future. The world will be made available to download once I've completed all 9 chapters, so if any commands here confuse you or you want to learn more on your own, you will be able to check this all out in the future. I'd also like to remind you that I have started doing live streams on the weekends, so if you want to come chat about command blocks or any other project I'm working on, make sure to stop on by when I'm streaming. Also, while you're at it, make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel with notifications turned on, that way you don't miss out on the next time I upload. But with that being said, thank you everyone so much for watching, and I will of course see you in my next video.